I know this was pointed out, but I have to share with you something from 27th of November that one of you said that I said. I want to play it for you now.
We should all take a moment to be thankful for the most important things: your loved ones, your health, and the fact that you are alive at this time. It is an amazing and glorious thing to be alive at this point in human history. I would also say, and I had a feeling this morning that I wasn't sure I was going to share with you or not, but I do think that things are particularly strong right now. Things are going very well. I get a little twinge of ominousness, that there's something ominous over the horizon in 2020. I couldn't tell you what it is. I always say nobody can predict the future, and don't trust anybody who says they can. But we're going to head into some. This is where all the cliched analogies come up. The stormy waters. We're something, because right now things just feel a little bit too stable, positive, strong, and there are ups and downs, my friends.
Well, I appreciate that listener pointed out that I had that, I guess you'd have to call it a premonition. 27th November. Where I said that I knew that something bad was coming in 2020 because things were just going far too well for far too long. And we were getting, as a people, and really as a global community, but particularly here in America, we were just getting kind of, fat and happy. Things were going good. And then we faced this new reality, this changed reality of everything changing. That's at least what it feels like right now. That's where we are with this. So, God, I really hope that what I was talking about in the last hour, I've never wanted anything so badly in my life as I want to get the news that we have effectively come up with a treatment for this disease, and then we can all just really, I don't want to celebrate early, and so I can't go there because we're not there yet. I don't even want to let my mind go to that place because we are in the trench, and the virus is coming at us right now. The virus is on its way to try and do as much damage to us as it possibly can, and we need to be prepared for it. But I just would note that there's, that there was a feeling. I really woke up with this feeling, and it was of dread, and it was that 2020 something bad was going to happen. And for me to go on radio and say that on a nationally syndicated radio show with hundreds of thousands of people across the country listening was noteworthy, I think. I don't know what it is other than just I'm glad all those times when I was on air that I was able to tell you, enjoy where we are right now. Enjoy your life right now. Things are good in this country. Don't listen all this stuff with the media. Think about how much they tried to rob us, psychologically rob us of what was one of the most prosperous and peaceful periods in the history of this country, in the history of the world. I mean, the first 3 years of the Trump presidency were a time of remarkable stability and growth, prosperity, happiness, joy, in so much as government can affect these things in your life, right? I mean, but also it was more than that. We just weren't in a period of major war. We weren't in a period of economic deprivation. So it wasn't about, oh, Trump is so great. Look at what Trump has done, so much as it was about the country was doing really well. And I knew it wasn't going to last. And I find myself now in this situation where I hope I was, it's just frustrating. I was going to say I would wish that I had never had to have those feelings because, or that I would be sitting here thinking what a silly little anecdote I shared with all of you. But instead, it feels like prophecy. And now we're in the midst of this fight. China is responsible. I wanted to switch gears here now to China. China is responsible for lying to the world about this virus. And the more we find out about this, the more it'll be clear that China does need to be held responsible. And I don't know how we even do that. What are we going to do? Demand reparations? How do we hold China responsible for not being honest with the world about this and then perhaps allowing the spread of a global pandemic that could have been completely stifled within Chinese borders? There are also a lot of people that are saying, how could the Chinese government, given its ability, its authoritarian impulse? Remember, China is a place where you can't speak out against the government, and if they want to make something go away, they will. Meaning they don't care about human rights. They had the one-child policy for decades. And I'm going to get more into the character of the Chinese regime. And again, understand that everything that I'm criticizing right now has nothing to do with individual Chinese people. China is a wonderful culture with fantastic people. It's one of the oldest, most powerful, and important cultures in the world. I'm talking about the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, the bad guys, the regime, the people ruling over the 1 billion Chinese who just want to go about their lives, love their families, provide for them, and, have their own joy and connection to humanity and the afterlife and everything else that we all do too, right? So we're in solidarity with the poor Chinese folks who have to live under this tyrannical regime that, yes, it has produced prosperity, but prosperity alone is not enough, as we've seen, because prosperity can go away, and then what are you left with? It's amazing that the Chinese government, and it's also deeply distressing, given how much they're able to lock down things, given how much power they are able to wield, it is stunning that they let this wet market phenomenon continue as long as they did, when there were blaring neon signs telling everybody who was paying attention, this is going to go really, really bad. This is going to be a big problem. You can't have 100, 200 different rare and exotic wild animal species all brought together in horrific, cramped, cruel conditions, alive, slaughtered with really no hygienic prevention or precautions whatsoever, and have human beings in close contact, not just with the animals, but with each other in a very densely populated city, places like Wuhan, but also Guangzhou. And, you look at these areas where they have these histories of these wet markets. I mean, the Chinese government, if they can shut down speech, they can for damn sure prevent people from, slaughtering ocelots and civets and, Asian crocodiles and all this other stuff that they're bringing into these markets, and bats. How could they let this go on? I mean, the Chinese will give people the death penalty for corruption, and no one even really knows what the corruption was. And I'm not saying they should do that for people who are just trying to make a living and feed themselves, but this is a regime that has an iron fist. The truth is, they weren't willing to stop. Weren't willing to stop this. And if they did shut it down in some cases, they allowed it in others. This is a massive totalitarian surveillance state. I couldn't even bring my phones into the country a year ago when I was there. And now we see that they allow this to happen, and the whole world is suffering as a result of it. And they're lying about it. They're telling lies about what really happened here. And those lies matter, because some people will believe them in China. Some people will believe them in the rest of the world. And ultimately, what is the truth of a Chinese Communist Party going to be going forward? That's something that they think is up for debate, up for the effects of propaganda over facts. What we really are reminded of here, though, is that for all the glitz and the glamour of the new buildings and the incredible feats of engineering and the pulling people, by the way, how did China pull all these people out of poverty? Markets. Yeah, we've been doing that a long time here. It's not like they came up with some incredible new secret sauce of how to make an economy do well. We've been doing markets here. Europe has been doing markets in the post-World War II era, and things have been fantastic. South Korea is far more on a per capita basis prosperous than China. So I think we give them all this credit because after decades of Communist Party rule that was horrifically brutal and heavy-handed and inhumane, they couldn't feed themselves in this massive country with a tremendous amount of arable land and fantastic river systems for irrigation. They couldn't figure out how to feed themselves in the 20th century. And so what they do, they changed and they adopted a market-based approach. And now people look at them and say, well, the Chinese Communist Party is actually, doing a pretty good job, all things considered, in a lot of ways. It's like, well, no, I don't think you get credit for not starving your own people and for finally figuring out what other countries had figured out decades and decades, in the case of the United States, really centuries before, which is that individual economic enterprise and free markets create wealth. Government redistribution creates scarcity and poverty and misery. But there's something else about the Chinese Communist Party that we have to remember here. And people are writing about how we're entering this is the start. We will look back at this as the start of a new Cold War with the Chinese Communist Party. I really believe that. I think that is what we're heading for now, because the outrage that we should feel as we go further along here and find out, as we suffer more, as we see our countrymen suffering and in misery and despair, hopefully not for very long and hopefully not very many. We'll have to see what the final tally is. Knowing that with each passing week, we find out more about how the Chinese were well aware early on about what was really going on with this, that it was their fault, that they should never have allowed people to be, that's right, you shouldn't be allowed to eat bat soup. Okay, there are reasons for public health and hygiene laws in this country and in any country. You're putting other people at risk. And now they're putting the whole world at risk with these absurd policies and traditions around eating wild animals and bringing them in these cages and the whole thing. Horrible idea. And it's been known about. And they've already had a few, SARS came from this. They think SARS came from the Guangzhou wet market in southeastern China, and it was a civet, which is like, it's like a little, kind of looks like a possum. It's about the size of a cat. Somebody was, eating fried civet, or wanted to, and as a result, you had, 800 people around the world died of SARS? I don't even remember what the final body count was, but the only reason we didn't have SARS this situation earlier with SARS was because SARS was so deadly that it's very hard to transmit. Essentially, by the time you show real symptoms, you can only transmit it when you have really bad symptoms. And by the time you have really bad symptoms, the mortality rate's really high. So essentially, the disease was so deadly, it mostly took care of itself. That should not have been reassuring, though, because anyone who knows anything about virology, anyone who understands how viruses work would have come away from this thinking, well, hold on a second. If all it takes is a mutation of a similar coronavirus, SARS is a coronavirus, same family as what we're dealing with now. That's why they call this actually SARS-CoV-2 is the scientific name for the virus before it turns into the disease, the manifestation in the human body of COVID-19. We should have known that this was going to come. This was only a matter of time. Everybody should have been able to figure this out. Chinese government didn't care. But this is a reminder of the Chinese Communist Party is immoral. That's something else. We don't often think enough about how our government has people who are imbeciles, and there are a lot of elected officials who are deeply unimpressive, and there's a lot of stuff that we wish was different about the way they approach their jobs and everything else. But ultimately, the United States government, because our people are moral and because our leadership has a system that was founded by moral people, and because there is an expectation of some decency. I know this is where people would scream, oh, what about what we did in Vietnam and everything else? I'm not saying we're perfect. I'm not saying we're always good. But there are things that would not be possible for our government to do that are possible for the Chinese government to do. And we've seen this now for decades. And a government made up of bureaucrats and officials who will stifle the most basic freedoms, who will put over 1 million Uyghurs, Muslim, ethnic, Turkic, Chinese into, or from near the Turkestan, this is a whole separatist region of Western, Xinjiang, China. But the Muslim Uyghurs in China being put into concentration camps, over 1 million of them. This is all indicative of the mindset of the Chinese Communist Party, which is that ultimately it's a government founded just on force. It's a thugocracy. Yeah, they've opened some markets, but mafia bosses like to make money too. That doesn't mean that they're moral. Doesn't mean that they're ethical. And we all know that if you try to conduct business in China, even if you're an international party like the United States, they'll rip you off, and they have no problem with it. And there's been a tremendous decades-long theft of intellectual property, which we all recognize is really the most valuable. That and resources are economies now. Natural resources and intellectual property. Human capital too, but you need to have those first two things if you're going to have your human capital beat the other guy's human capital. So China is a regime that we are on a collision course with now because they've definitely lied about this. They're trying to put this on the United States. And I would note that, I started this segment out with how I had a feeling something bad was coming in this year. Trump was right on China. He's been right all along. This bipartisan blindness to what the Chinese regime has been doing and the way that they've been conducting themselves for decades against international partners, particularly against the United States, has put us into a position right now where we have to say, hold on a second, not only are they the cause of a global pandemic that will result in the erasing of trillions of dollars when all said and done of U.S. wealth. That's probably what we're facing here, even if things don't go that badly, meaning, we're not in a worst case scenario. And the Chinese are seeing this, I think, they say they've already got this disease locked down. They're seeing this as an opportunity. They will see this as an opportunity to try to get ahead of us. So we're going to have to confront at some point the reality of, is this the equivalent of reckless, when you have a reckless endangerment or involuntary manslaughter, is the Chinese Communist Party guilty of reckless or involuntary biological warfare against the world and against the United States? If they were covering this up, as we know they were, and if that could have stopped it, what would somebody else like to call it? They knew. They have advanced scientists. They have advanced disease experts. They lied about this because they were hoping to make it somebody else's problem. Man, just when I feel like I couldn't handle any more sad news, Tulsi Gabbard has dropped out of the presidential race officially. Suspended her campaign, same thing. Democrats run around talking so much about how they want a woman candidate, and they have this woman candidate who's a minority and a veteran, and they just never warmed up to her, no interest in supporting her, the Democrat establishment. It's really pretty bizarre, but that's all we got. She was at less than 1%, and Tulsi's campaign is donezo. I've tried so hard to avoid overt partisanship in all of this, making this about something that it's not. And I think that we're doing a particularly good job on the show. This is not about left versus right. It's, all these cliches you'll hear from people in other circumstances, and then they just go and act like it is left versus right. They say it so that they, throw you off. They say it so that you won't really pay attention to what's really going on. But it turns out they are using it as a partisan cudgel, a partisan tool against the other side. I try to avoid that as much as I can here. I'm giving shout outs, and I know some of you are like, that guy's a Democrat. I don't care. If someone's doing a good job right now, they're doing a good job. And that's what really matters. This is 30 days that we're going to see what our government is really made of. We're also going to see to some degree what the American people are really made of. And it's just crunch time. We haven't seen anything like this as a country in my lifetime. And really, there's going to start to be a lot of comparisons made between what we're seeing right now and 1918, the response to the Spanish flu in 1918, that pandemic. I don't think this is going to be as bad as that was by any stretch, but just in terms of what we're able to do now versus what they were able to do then. What the government then was completely caught unawares in so many ways and didn't have a whole lot of tools to deal with it. So there's now this press briefing that happens every day, and I think the president's doing a very good job of calming people down. Governor Cuomo. Because I'm here in New York State. I'm watching his press briefing too. He's also doing a good job. But there is this, you can tell now, ethos among the press corps that they really think that the most helpful thing they can do, they're so programmed, and I don't want to make this more about the press than it should be, but they're so programmed to think in terms of what's going to be the soundbite that gets them on TV or, gets everyone watching them, talking about them, and also that the only way you get to the facts you need and accountability from the government is to be on offense because Trump is the president, that they can't put it aside. They can't find themselves acting like normal people would in the circumstances of who cares if Trump misspoke on something. At this point, it is not possible to have an IQ over 60 and not understand fully that the president is sometimes imprecise in his speech, but we all know what he is saying. There's never any doubt about what the president says on most of these issues that the journalists say, oh, can you clarify that? You said that, we're doing a good job against this, but is that really a good job? What is a good job? Why are you saying it's a good job? It's just nonsense. This is why you also had Kellyanne Conway, for example, ask a reporter who claims that she was talking to a White House official who said to her, hey, said to her something about the Kung flu. And she's an Asian American reporter, and she claims that this was, and she had a tweet that went totally viral on this, viral, there's that word, where, she's saying, oh, look at this White House. Effectively, this White House is so racist, they're even saying racist things to the media that's covering it. And then Kellyanne Conway pushes her on this and says, okay, name the person. I want to know. It's unacceptable. Who said it? And the journalist won't say who said this to her. And now, I think there's really only two possibilities here. Because if you're a journalist and you hate this administration, which 95% of journalists do, even now, even while we're bracing for something that does not care about party affiliation, that does not care, which cable news channel someone watches, the journalists can't stop. They can't help themselves. They're programmed. This is like a mental illness that they can't get over. It is Trump derangement syndrome as seen through the prism of covering this White House and covering this administration. And so when she's asked the question, well, please tell me exactly, who is it that said this? She says, oh, I'm a journalist and I can't, reveal my sources. Really? There's only two possibilities here. One is that it's such a low level person and was said in such a non-threatening way that, or, a way not meant to be in any way offensive, or maybe this person thinks they had a good enough relationship where they could make what they thought was a joke, that it wouldn't have any real impact. So she doesn't want to tell anybody because, saying that the junior White House staffer who made an offhand remark to you, destroying that person's life, possibly getting them fired, it's not worth it, so they won't do it. The other possibility is that she just made it up. Those are the only possibilities that I see. I do not believe that someone senior in this White House said Kung flu to this reporter and she won't tell us who said it. Because she would immediately be considered some kind of a hero to the left for exposing the racism of the Trump administration. Once again, it needs to be exposed. You also had at CNN, Caitlin Collins, someone that I used to know a long time ago, used to work at the Daily Caller, believe it or not. Now she dances to the tune set out by Jeff Zucker every day. How is it acceptable at all that we don't have enough masks? I agree that it's unacceptable that we don't have enough masks, but I also think we need to keep in mind that the Trump administration, they're not in the mask making business, literally in that business. That's not what they do. And no one ever expected there to be a need for this many masks. And there are clearly some supply chain issues and some manufacturing shortcomings, including we don't make this stuff here in America, right? This is why when Trump has been talking about bringing industry, it's just so interesting to me. He's getting attacked because we don't have enough of something that is made in China. We don't have the manufacturing capacity to make it ourselves fast enough here. And Trump is the president who came into office against all the free trade absolutists out there. It's so easy to say you're for free trade all the time, right? Okay, I'm for free trade too, but what is free trade? Is China engaged in free trade with us? It's so easy to have this be a mantra and then think that you're very clever because you always say, oh, I'm a free trader. Okay. What do we do about countries that have tariffs in place? We just keep getting, what do we do about countries that allow us to do free trade with them and then they steal our intellectual property as part of the proposition? But Trump is the one who has been saying all along, we need more domestic manufacturing capability. We need more machines making stuff for us here. And now he's getting slammed because something that's made in China that's not made here, we don't have enough of. And then never mind, you get into basic pharmaceuticals and antibiotics that we're really going to need. And the Chinese government, which I've been telling you, is the CCP is evil. The people that run it, they're willing to engage in depravity and immorality. The CCP is an evil group. They will do things that other governments would not be willing to do, and they do it on a regular basis. But they've got so much money now because they've leveraged the ingenuity, creativity, and hard work of the Chinese people. The Communist Party in China has so much power globally because of the money they wield that you have a lot of people who are cowards at this point in time. And the willingness of our own media, when we are all in this state of heightened concern, I'm not going to say panic, heightened concern over this coming wave of pandemic infection, the willingness of the media to parrot Chinese Communist Party talking points is stunning. And then you think more about how, well, the Chinese, there's a huge market in China. I mean, there's a reason why the Top Gun movie that didn't even come out, I feel like nobody even saw it. I mean, there's a reason why the Top Gun movie removed the Taiwan patch, the new Top Gun movie removed the Taiwan patch from, Maverick, played by Tom Cruise, as you all know, on his leather jacket, his bomber jacket. There's a reason. And, you would think that if journalists, there are people right now who are rising to the challenge all across the country. And I really believe this. There are a lot, we hear often about people who, will do the right thing and make the right choice in times of crisis. I think there are people who find themselves in crisis, who recognize that this is purpose. This is existential purpose for them, that they can really do more right now, do more good, do more to be helpful than they've ever been able to do before. And they're just getting in all that usefulness, all that utility, all that bravery, all that courage in this one moment. You see this, for example, with people who serve in the military. Right? They step up, and whether they serve 1 year or 20 years, when they step up and they're called to war, they recognize that is a concentrated act of selflessness and courage and service to the nation. Well, we're not fighting a human enemy, so this isn't, although the military is going to be doing some very important things here. I know the United States Comfort, and there's another, I forget the name of the other ship, these hospital ships are going to be called out. The Mercy, yes, the Mercy and the Comfort, they're going to be providing. They're not going to be COVID response ships. They're going to be deployed to give extra medical capacity to areas hard hit by COVID-19 cases so that they can treat people that have a heart attack, or they can treat people that need emergency medicine of any kind and not have them go into a COVID facility, because that's going to be a big problem here. You're going to have a lot of people that are going into these emergency rooms, going into hospitals, and anybody else who goes in who's not a COVID patient, they've got to be very concerned about the spread of this. But some people are rising to the challenge in really incredible and profound ways. And, I know I've been hearing for years about the people that are part of this audience, that are part of Team Buck, who are truckers, who are working in small business, but who either are in agriculture or farmers, part of the food supply chain. And right now, anybody who shows up to a grocery store anywhere in America, and I'm sure a lot of them are going to be wearing masks and gloves and doing all the things they should to protect themselves, and that's great. And we hope that they're taking all the measures they can. But anybody who's willing to show up and do that job right now, you are carrying a burden for your country. You could go home and say, look, I'm just going to live off of credit cards for a couple of months if you don't have savings to handle this. But I'm not taking that risk. You could do that. What would happen if everybody did that? What would happen if everyone who works at a grocery store, I mean, last night I went out for a walk in my neighborhood, quiet in a way that I've never seen it before, ever. And I went out and there was a little store and it's a neighborhood place and they just make the most amazing roast chicken. And there was just one lady and one guy there working together. And I did what I said. I gave them, I came in and just took a chicken in the bag, 20% tip. If I could have given them, actually now I think I could do a special tip, although I don't want to touch the iPad that much. But, I'll up it to 25% next time. I'm going to try to keep anybody who's showing up and doing their job. Yes, we want to thank them, but we also want to reward them financially to the degree that we can. Maybe, if I keep tipping everybody $20 every time they bring a sandwich to me in New York or every time I go get takeout somewhere, eventually I would run out of money, but it's going to take a long time. I'm not worried about that. So I'm happy to do what little part that I can, and I know that all the rest of you feel the same way. Do whatever you can, and that can be taking care of somebody. You can go in. I'm going to be making a grocery run for family members later today. I'm going to be going to the pharmacy for them. Just whatever. I've got Tallulah here, the little adorable but very high maintenance French bulldog, because I don't want my parents exposing themselves to crowds right now. And the streets of New York City, there's still people walking around. So I'm taking care of the family dog. Whatever you can do. But we see people that show up at grocery stores. We see our truckers who are still behind the wheel, still showing up at those deliveries. People that work for cable companies that often get a lot. And look, I'm mea culpa here. I give the cable companies grief sometimes too for not doing a great job. Although I will say Verizon Fios really did make amends for what was a rocky start with them here in New York. They stepped up big time. But now they're all stepping up. Imagine what the world feels like if our internet all of a sudden became overloaded or went dark. Imagine what it starts to feel like when we can't connect to each other in FaceTime. So everyone who's doing what we need them to do right now, when there's a lot of panic and a lot of fear going around, they're stepping up for their country. They're stepping up for all of us. And I think we're going to come out of this crisis. And I hope that I know that I will, I know that you will, and I hope the whole country feels a renewed sense of gratitude for every person who shows up and does their job with honor and dignity, whatever the job is, whatever honest position you have anywhere in the economy. Anybody who shows up and does their job and is contributing deserves respect, deserves our thanks, and particularly right now, those who are doing even the most straightforward day-to-day kind of jobs, but are putting themselves out there in the virus red zone so that the rest of us have, a chicken in the fridge. The rest of us can go get bread, can go get groceries. I mean, This is the layer we need in place if we're going to beat this. And there have to be people who are willing to take that extra risk. And we're seeing it. And I really don't know how to thank the people that are showing up. I feel like no one's saying thank you enough to them. And I'm actually going to go out of my way to tell the people at the CVS, at the Duane Reade, at my local grocery store here, thank you for being here and doing this. I tell it to the people who work in my building, because I live in a very tall apartment building in New York. I'm telling them every day, thanks for showing up. What happens if they say, no, I'm staying home, I'm too scared? Well, who's going to take the packages that we need to keep life going here? Who's going to be making sure that when, the boiler breaks or when there's some issue in the building, it's going to get, does anyone want to try to figure that out on their own? So there are a lot of people here who are stepping up and, particularly our truckers, our grocery workers, our farmers, our food supply people working pharmaceuticals, just name anybody who's part of that supply chain of keeping us able to shelter in place or stay at home or quarantine or whatever you want to call it. We owe them. And I got to tell you, I'm happy there that I was able to avoid getting too deep into the conversation about journalists, because what I was going to say is that while we're seeing the best of people who are often underappreciated or people don't notice enough in their day-to-day lives, the guys, and I can only speak to New York City, really what I'm seeing, people who are out there delivering food. They're delivering food to people who are terrified. They're delivering food to people who can't leave their homes because they're at the high-risk population. They're doing a critical service. And they're taking risks by being out there and being around people, exchanging, packages with individuals, giving them the food that they're ordering and everything else. And they're stepping up. And what's just so remarkable to me is that a lot of the journalists that I'm seeing are still stuck in the wrong mindset. They're being petty. They're being childish. They view this as an attempt, as an opportunity to slam Trump. And it's just so disheartening and so disgraceful. And I'm hoping that they will snap out of it any moment now, but I'm not going to bet on it.